Hello, Miguel. I'm very happy to have you in my podcast today, especially as the two of us were speaking about innovation and sustainability in our conversation before today's recording. So I'm very much looking forward to what we're going to discuss today, what findings we will take out of this. So very warm welcome to you, Miguel.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
My pleasure, Miguel. We're going to speak about turning life cycle insights into business value, innovation, and ownership. So, the focus topic of our conversation today will be life cycle assessments. Before we are diving into the topic, I'm going to introduce you to the audience. Miguel, you are a designer, system thinker, and innovation consultant working at the intersection of creativity, technology, and sustainability. What drives you is the question of how good ideas not only emerge, but are transformed into impactful, real world solutions, always with a strong focus on people at the center. You operate across the interface of design, entrepreneurship, and strategic innovation, from working with startups to developing future proof products, services, and business models. In doing so, you combine analytical thinking with hands-on creative practice, making complex topics tangible and actionable. What particularly sets you apart is your interdisciplinary approach. You bring together diverse perspectives, foster learning and innovation processes, and create environments where new ideas can emerge, evolve, and scale. Miguel, let's start with a personal and more generic question at the beginning. How did your own journey with life cycle assessment start?
Okay, yeah, I guess it starts. You have to go back to my training days to academia. I'm
Yeah.
trained as an engineer, so part of that involved becoming aware of how you can better develop products and solutions. So, but back then it was just kind of the seed sown, and it's taken me a good 10, 15 years to actually be hands-on with life cycle analysis and a holistic approach to quantifying what we are bringing to the world is actually impacting it. So it's over the last 4 years in my current employment where I've been actively driving the use and the development of life cycle analysis as part of product development and solution design.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Very good. So that's an interesting journey that you have, as we already heard also in the introduction. You position life cycle analysis as more than an analytical tool. Why is it becoming a strategic capability for companies today, in your view?
Yeah, well, if you've seen the outcome of an LCA, you probably think it's a lot of numbers and a lot of jargon
Yeah.
packaged together. But beyond that, an LCA, I think of it also as a map of your impacts. And as any map, I think it holds a lot of value. It's just that you need to kind of unpack it. I would say that there are at least two big ways in which an LCA can assist strategy, and I would say they're both related with competitiveness. One would be staying competitive in this quickly evolving landscape that we all operate in. That involves increasing regulatory pressure, stakeholders demanding transparency, supply chain risks with resource scarcity. So in general, LCA delivers in all those chapters. You have very juicy stuff coming out of an LCA that you can leverage to make informed strategic decisions. And the other way would be competitiveness through performance, understanding performance as lower environmental impact. So the moment you assess your impact, the lower it is, the more competitive you've become. And interestingly, right now I'm working in the construction sector. And here it is interesting to see, for example, how the specification of solutions for a building, there's a shift here. And architects and more looking for good solutions to put in their buildings in EPD portals, in the portals where LCAs are published, rather
Mhm.
than in traditional specification channels. So
Mhm.
that's also kind of an interesting strategic commercial shift
Yeah,
together, driven by LTA. Yeah.
absolutely. I wasn't aware of that. So thanks for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
When we take a look in the, let's say, broader topic of business value and impact, and in the next questions, how does LCA help organizations build real internal awareness? So, especially in identifying sustainability hotspots and system-wide effects.
Yeah. So using the analogy of the map, yeah, the map is showing where your impacts actually are,
Yeah,
the so-called hotspots. And this could be, for example, if you're thinking of a building, that might be the use stage of the building, the lifetime. So if there's good insulation, not so good insulation, that has an environmental impact. Or if you're into electronics, the manufacturing stage, for example, is more critical. So depending on what you're doing, your hotspot would be somewhere, or I don't know, thinking, for example, with low density goods that you're shipping, transport is going to hurt you very much in terms
yeah,
of impact
absolutely.
because you're transporting air essentially. So that's the hotspots. But the other thing that comes with an LCA is that systems view of things. There trade-offs, there are interactions that are sometimes unexpected. So what can happen is you're trying to optimize something locally in your product, in your process, in the life cycle, and you're unintentionally worsening something somewhere else. So that system-wide thinking is something that comes out of LCA. So once you have the map, what is critical also is that this information transcends the environmental department or the sustainability department. This I would say this complex artifact of an LCA is something that is very relevant for procurement and for operations and for R&D and leadership, because it provides accountability and it
Yeah.
avoids taking siloed decisions. So yeah, I think those two hotspots and systems thinking is something that is very much relevant as yeah,
A personal question in between, Miguel. So it's a lot of, as you said, number crunching, right? So getting
yeah.
the right data and then also digesting it and taking the right solutions out of it. I did not perceive you as a typical number cruncher guide. Guy. Yeah. So how does that work together with you being, let's say, very also
Yeah,
uh,
no, we're mentioning a
conversant?
lot of disclosure. So my disclosure would be I wouldn't be the deep expert in number crunching. So
Yeah.
I try to um, uh, operate at a certain altitude level where you have good perspective of things, you have a good understanding of multiple areas. But luckily, I have my numbers guy right now
All
because
right.
it's a full area of expertise.
Yeah.
So you want deep experts in the matters that really require finesse, and it's also good to have a basic understanding of things. But it's impossible to be
Absolutely.
extremely competent working with numbers and also having kind of a broad understanding of things.
Yeah.
So yeah. No,
Makes
you're
it
right in the
makes
sense that numbers. I'm not a finance guy in any way. Yeah,
It's not necessary. You need to bring together the right people, and then it can perfectly work out, right?
for sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, next question that I have: what role does LCA play in enhancing external transparency, and how should leaders think about communicating those insights?
Okay, yeah. So um, here I would probably first of all let me elaborate here. There's a thing with comparability. You want to disclose and you want to state what you're doing,
Mm,
but you have to expect that people will read you against others. So this thing about I publish, therefore I'll be compared. There are caveats here. There's ISO standards behind LCA, so there you have a let's say a framework of compliance. But also in the process, you have to make choices where you have plenty of freedom. You can decide the functional unit you're using to perform your analysis, or the boundaries you're considering, or the methods you use to allocate the impacts, things like that. So in the end, whatever you publish, you know you can defend it. It's defensible, but it's not necessarily comparable. So
yeah.
that's kind of a tricky thing. So the first thought probably you're going to have when you're thinking, okay, I'm going to publish this. Now that I did it, I want to, do the fair thing and be transparent. You're going to feel exposed. Probably it's somehow like an audit you're doing to yourself. And then, we all know, I think audits can be embarrassing somehow. There's always things that are not so great in
Yeah.
audits, but it's the way it is. I mean, it's not just about the strengths; it's also
Sure.
about the weaknesses.
Yeah.
So The temptation probably is you think, okay, I'll do this myself. I'll do a self-declaration. I can digest the findings into, let's call them honest bits. So, and I just share that. But this is risky. I would not advise to do that because consciously or maybe unconsciously, we all have biases and we end up cherry picking your better bits, and
Yeah.
maybe you blur somehow your weaknesses. So somebody could say that's greenwashing in the making, even
Mm.
if although it's unintended. So the proper way to disclose would be to rely on third-party verification. You have environmental product declarations, or you have FDS or CAM declarations in France or in Italy, where there's a third party that verifies. It's slightly higher cost, but it makes it more robust. So therefore, you're no longer feeling exposed, but rather you become more credible in the sense that what you did has been verified by a qualified third party.
Yeah. I have to ask a side question now, because what I mean, we're speaking about increased transparency, right? This is
Yeah,
something that a lot of people in the business world are not really fond of. So disclosing more than is really necessary.
yeah.
Um, and I would say this has changed over the last 20 years since I'm working in this business and in the
Mhm.
search industry. What would you say is, let's say, the biggest challenge in, let's say, getting the people to working on this increased transparency? How do you get the people on board of such a journey?
Well, as with any change, there's a law of diffusion. So there's early adopters, and then there's followers, and then there's, how it works. So obviously, you need your leaders in place, setting the way to go, establishing, and first movers who say, okay, I'm doing this because this is the right thing to do.
Mm,
There's obviously going to be concerns about, oh, why would I let everyone know, how I make my product, what it's made of, or things like that. Obviously, you're not expected to have full transparency and disclose every single detail, like the secret formula of your sauce or your, your chemistry or things like
yeah.
that. Obviously, there are, let's say, good practices in how you can disclose while keeping what's secret.
Mhm,
So you can define maybe ranges of values. So between this and that value, but not giving an exact one. So
mhm,
you fork things a little bit, or you just kind of give a broader perspective. And I guess that as we all follow that path, this becomes less uncomfortable. We all get more used to this kind of thing,
yeah.
and eventually we reach let's say, a plateau or a balance point where we're disclosing what needs to be disclosed, and everyone is doing so, or most
Mhm,
are. Yeah,
mhm. I will speak about culture shift a bit later, but this is definitely paying into it.
yeah.
From your experience, how does LCA shift the way companies identify and prioritize sustainability risks at a strategic level?
Yeah, well, LCA, as we already mentioned, it's strongly based on data. It's quantitative, it's fact based, and in that sense, I guess it's a solid tool for certain types of environmental assessment. It's powerful in that it's, let's say, it's true. But I would say, going back to the map analogy, we are going through complex systems, and probably for the risk assessment in sustainability terms, LCA is not the ideal tool for that, or the ideal map for that. It's one map among many others. So what would be top of mind for me, probably in terms of sustainability risks in the strategic level, would be probably the double materiality assessment. So this combines not only quantitative data, but also qualitative. You have multiple stakeholder input. It covers social governance risks along with environmental, and you also identify what's material not only to your business, but so for your stakeholders. So with a broader perspective, probably DMA would be my go-to tool, and LCA would help in establishing environmental footprint and something closer to impact rather than to potential risks and opportunities. So I guess depends on where you want to what you want to tune into. Is it more that are present and data backed, or is it more speculative, future thinking, establishing future horizons with a social governance perspective, it's all packaged together? I guess it depends.
Yeah. Okay. You emphasize ownership. Why is it critical for organizations to build internal LCA capabilities rather than relying primarily on external consultants?
Well, yeah, definitely ownership is, I would say, if not the biggest benefit, one of the bigger ones of internalizing LCA. But the key with internalization, not just of LCA, but I would say anything you want to bring in, is if you're ready for that. Is let's say how ready, how mature your organization is to take that in. And usually, I would say most organizations, ours included, start their journey with LCA, EPDs, and so on, with help from external consultants.
Mhm.
With that approach, you start with focus on the output. You get your LCA, you get an EPD, you get your document, and you can do things with that already.
Yeah.
And with that, you're not building internal expertise, but it's really actionable results. But the thing is, data collection is probably, we mentioned data and data crunching. I'd say it's roughly 80% of the effort you need to make to pull off an LCA. So if you're working with a consultant, you do that, you do the work, the heavy lifting, you feed it to the consultant, they build a model, and they send you back a PDF,
Mhm.
which is fine in terms of, okay, I got my deliverable, that's
Yeah.
fine. If, for example, you halfway through, you think, okay, but there's a second scenario I'd like to explore or a possibility, probably you're going to get quoted for that. So there'll be kind of an extra uh, few thousand there.
Yeah.
And if you want to understand trade-offs or interactions between phenomena, you really can't access your consultant's model. So all
Mhm.
this goes to say that it's closer to a black box model, and you're paying for convenience, but you're also getting lack of flexibility and the ownership we mentioned earlier. So internalization is the way to go if you want to build something you can use in more ways than just getting your output.
Yeah.
Let's say you want to iterate, you want to simulate alternatives, you want to understand why things are happening. You need to have the data to own it and to understand it. But it's also going to take, I'd say, a good 18 to 24 months to get that really locked in. You need to set up data flows. You need to train your teams. You need to learn to interpret the results
Mhm.
and even embed LCA into your improvement cycles. So
Yeah.
by the time you're done, you have a very nice flywheel where one thing is driving the next. But
Mhm.
it's not really short term and short term results oriented. It's more
Yeah.
of a process setup. Yeah.
What I really like about this aspect is that with this internal approach, you also, of course, fuel internal learning of the organization, right? Otherwise,
Oh
it's
yeah.
just taught,
Yeah.
taught knowledge, so to say, and nothing that really changes something in the organization. But on the way, people learn, people get a different perspective on what the company is doing, what the life cycle looks like, and then the whole organization can learn through this, right?
Yeah. I mean, even this morning we had a catch-up call with one of our group's companies team that is driving. They're the boots on the ground in terms of data collection. And my colleague and I, we were asking them questions, and we could see how they had never asked themselves those questions. As in, why is this? Why is that? What is this made of? Is it
Yeah.
always like that? Are there any variations? And it's a great way to really learn about your own processes and organizations, because you ask a lot of what ifs. Why is that? Is that all? Is there more? So yeah, it's very, and for a curious person, it's great.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. I mean, I think that's also one of the things that we all should learn a bit more, asking good questions instead of just giving good answers.
yeah.
That helps a lot also for the other people that you're speaking to reflect and also to learn. Um, Many companies still focus on single metrics like carbon footprint. what do you think changes when you introduce a multi-indicator perspective?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, absolutely, carbon footprint is very popular nowadays. It's pretty much
Sure.
everywhere. You see it in all
Yeah.
conversations now. You can, speak to your in-laws, and they might mention your something related with carbon footprint. And I guess it's kind of it's seductive. It's one metric. It's easy to communicate, and even if you don't really see the CO2, you can relate. You can reason around it. You can relate your acts with the impact. But of course, it's incomplete. Thing is that, as I mentioned in the beginning, there are interactions, trade-offs, and unexpected couplings of phenomena. So maybe you're optimizing for low carbon, but in doing so, maybe you're worsening your water stress levels or your toxicity,
Mhm.
or maybe your
Fair point. Mhm.
biodiversity. This, for example, has happened to us where in our products we use minerals and resins, and we thought, okay, let's do something very, very sensible. Let's move from fossil fuel based resins to bio based.
Mhm.
We're saving the world. It's going to be great. We're going to save so much carbon. But the thing is, bio based resins take a lot of water. So the fossil fuel based do not so much have a big carbon footprint, but water footprint is far lower. Whereas a bio based, so this is just to show that the single metric view might be a good stepping stone, a good first step you can take towards measuring things and taking decisions. But definitely, you want to have a multi-metric setup where you really have a broad view. And in fact, this is not me saying so. It's all the main frameworks like CSRD or ESRS, they're all bringing multi-indicator disclosure, and even supply chains are also beginning to inquire. You get requests from customers saying, okay, can you tell me a little bit more about your water footprint or your toxicity levels or things
Yeah.
like that? So yeah, the problem I would say is that while CO2, we can imagine what it does to the world somehow. If we think of acidification potential, for example, measured in SO2 equivalent, it's really, maybe you can get numerical precision, but you don't really know very well how to act on that. So that's the challenge. The challenge, I would say, it's making those multi indicators intelligible, making them transparent and honest and actionable. That's probably the what lays ahead.
Yeah. Very makes a lot of sense. So I think this aspect is probably pretty underestimated. I mean, a lot of people, especially in the sustainability community, are aware of this, obviously, but I think it's very important to also think about what what is, let's say, the impact of when we do this kind of change, like you just said. Is it really an improvement for us and for the environment, or is
Yeah.
it probably just shifting the problem to a different uh, point?
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. And now comes a really interesting one. So very much looking forward to your answer on this. You mentioned that LCA can generate a positive return on investment early on. Where does the economic value typically come from?
Well, I would say in savings, essentially, but not only in savings, but definitely in savings. We did a
Yeah.
very basic business case when we internalized LCA capabilities at ES Group, and just the cost of 1 year's license for the LCA tool that we use, plus the hours spent by the team on training and hands-on work, was far lower than commissioning the projects we executed in that just 1 year.
Mm.
So I would say ROI is 1 year in our case, easily, if not months. And this is just, just looking into economics, which is just one part of a picture, because as I was saying earlier, we've gained so much flexibility and empowerment in terms of saying, okay, what if, and having quantified responses to what if questions in terms of environmental impact. That's really valuable. I wouldn't know how to put a price tag on that, but if we just talk about economics, there's definitely savings if you do your due diligence and you implement it committedly. Of course, if this takes years to bring to action, then ROI extends longer. But in our case, I'd say it's 12 months.
You mentioned now it can come early on, but you mentioned a bit earlier that it will take, let's say, doing this internally 18 to 24 months. So how do you bring the two time frames together? So what is maybe coming on top after the first months have been realized? So what,
Yeah.
yeah,
I
just give
guess
me
the
some
first
view.
stage you would want to consider is just doing as the consultant does, but by yourself, and that already brings uh, direct economic savings in the
Yeah.
sense, and that can happen relatively quickly.
uh,
There's onboarding processes for those tools. You learn by doing. You just start practicing. You ask questions. You go to events. You read. So you basically engage with the thing, and you gradually you're in a just a continuous learning process. And after that, I guess the more challenging next step would be introducing LCA outcomes and this map that I so much refer to into decision making
yeah.
internally. So engaging with other areas into making informed decisions, such as let's switch a raw material or a supplier, or let's use this other transport system, or that kind of thing. It has direct implications, and if you don't work into that second stage, you still have your siloed view of having an internal consultant versus having an external one. It's
mm,
good. You can have your savings, but in the long run, you want to go push, and that's where you go 18, 24, 36 months. Of
yeah.
course, depends on the organization, but it's not a single stage internalization, I would say.
Okay, understood. Thanks for this. Coming now to the aspect which I personally like the most, innovation. Um, how can LCA reshape product development decisions when impact criteria are considered alongside cost and quality?
In some of the aspects we have somehow already mentioned, um, the having a view of hotspots and interactions can reveal blind spots in your product development.
Yeah,
So typically, any company has developed solid NPD processes for quality, functionality, and a number of, let's say, economic or engineering driven requirements are being met. So that is solid. Now, here we come with a new set of information criteria that is not so established. So, I mentioned earlier the example that we have faced of how what initially seemed like a beautiful idea of switching from one type of resin to
yeah,
another was
yeah,
then kind of a whoa, 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 maybe we should just rethink this. And in that case, it wouldn't be, in the case of the resin that I mentioned, it wouldn't be that, okay, so it's not the carbon footprint, it's water that's important. It's not like that either. So it's not just saying, okay, do you love more mom or dad
yeah,
times whatever number of criteria you have. It's that you need to accommodate everything. And
yeah,
in the end, you're forcing a crucial question, which would be what matters the most for this product and for us. So is
mm,
it the water? Is it the carbon footprint? Or is it something else? So it depends on multiple factors which are contextual to you, and you need to do some soul searching there. You need to
yeah,
really have deep discussions with many colleagues internally and say, what is more critical for us? Where should we really need to focus? So I think the shift is really there. And another thing that comes to mind is you would want to do that before you actually develop options. So you need to establish the criteria before you evaluate alternatives. You could end up just cherry picking the metrics and say, okay, we're going to go with this and this because it favors this option that we want more. We
yeah,
prefer option B than C. And then we will only consider this criteria here and there. And
yeah,
the rest we'll forget about. It's uncomfortable. It's something that really there's no instructions manual for executing this process. It's something you need to unfold. It has to do with innovation, but again, it has to do with culture, with how much you're allowed to do this
yeah,
as part of your innovation process, how much you can, question the way we do things. So
mm,
definitely cathartic.
mhm. Are you aware of, let's say, a really catchy example? Doesn't only need to come from your organization or past organizations, can also be another company that really shows why, when taking a closer look at LCA, can lead to a really nice innovation, product innovation?
Well, not really one that immediately comes to mind, I have
Yeah,
to say. I would say this this is more of the epic narrative we are more used to. Where, of course, we've all heard of the olive that was no longer part of the airline menu, and they save I don't know how much CO2, etc. I haven't seen that LCA. I haven't seen that, the proof for that. But
yeah.
I'm really curious. And
Hmm.
in general, I think your question is very legitimate, but it represents a type of approach that is kind of the one shot huge success.
Yeah,
And in my experience, it's usually a far rougher
yeah,
trail that you have to go through, where there are successes, there are moments where you realize you're really hitting the nail on the head, but many times you're just struggling to try to understand what's going on and what is the right thing to do.
yeah.
So I can't really say I have a ton of examples, or none for
No.
that matter. As in,
Probably
okay,
better, Miguel. Probably is even better because I was just thinking when you elaborated on this that it's probably better not to have this, let's say, lighthouse example that everyone might be striving for, and in the end, it's just more boring than if you're not able to realize such a strong innovation that is really catchy as an example.
yeah, but I'd be really curious to. I mean, maybe it's just me that I'm just uninformed and not really up to speed with the go-to cases. So I'm really interested if anyone's watching this and wants to comment. I'd say, okay, have you heard about? Of course, we could say Patagonia or the usual heroes, but yeah, I think I'll stick to my. Now that I built my case of the humble, continuous work. I will stick with that, but I'm interested if anyone, wants to share any story. I'd really love to read about those cases.
Please reach out to us. Let us know.
Yeah.
We're most interested in any kind of real glamorous, catchy examples, if there are. So, to what extent can LCA be applied beyond products? So, when we take a look, for example, at services, generally at business models, or even entire value networks, what would you say to this?
Yeah, well, I would say I'm pretty courageous in the sense that I want to try things, and
Yeah,
I like to say, why not? Let's give it a shot. But we have to be realistic and responsible too. So LCA was built for products
yeah,
mostly, like discrete, bounded entities, things you can touch and feel. So conceptually, I would say, yeah, the approach, you can take it anywhere. You can do a whole lifetime reflection on your own life, or anything you can think of. But as you stretch it beyond products, the model is going to start failing somehow. So
yeah,
if you're thinking maybe services that have physical intensity, like a hotel or transport or catering, I guess you could manage to do something decent there. But if you move onwards to information intensive services like consulting or software or finance, you're starting to allocate shared infrastructure like data centers or things like that, like more arbitrarily, and you really say, what am I actually responsible of the whole impact of a data center? What's my share there? And it starts to be fuzzier, and the further you go from physical goods, probably the more you're starting to speculate. Business models is another, a more abstract entity than services. Yeah, I guess you would want, for example, to compare a circular business model and a linear business model and say, what's the difference? And can an LCA help me assess if I should go linear or circular? The thing is, LCA is usually built on facts, and this would be modeling hypothetical scenarios.
yeah.
So, if you're thinking of a material, what if it wasn't recycled, or how many cycles was it recycled? it starts to compound the level of speculation. And I think you mentioned also value networks. That would be kind of the ultimate case in distance from the intended use of LCA. So probably you're breaking the tool with that. Although
Yeah,
I have to say it would be interesting to see what you could try to do. But definitely, I think it works very well for products. It
yeah,
might be useful for services with some physical throughput, and then onwards it just drops in quality and relevance.
yeah. Totally understandable. And let's see what happens over the next years and maybe 10, 20 years. What's going to evolve out of this based on the work that people like yourself are
Sure.
doing.
No, yeah, and this depends on what we have available to perform. I mean,
Yeah,
as AI progresses, as more data is available, maybe what I personally now see as an obstacle, maybe other practitioners do not share the opinion, but
yeah.
maybe this can change radically and say, no, no, we have a way of being really fine
Mhm.
in allocating impact, and
Yeah.
fine by me. Yeah, yeah.
My final two questions, Miguel, are around implementation and leadership. So, from your experience, what do you think are key enablers for successful LCA adoption, both in terms of capabilities and leadership commitment?
Yeah, in terms of capabilities, definitely you're going to need um, good information systems, or information systems that can get better as you
Yeah.
need more information. Maybe your starting point is not ideal, but ideally you can work with someone in fetching, in modeling, in digitizing things that are in printed paper, or whatever. But you're going to eat data, so you want definitely good information systems. A healthy relationship with suppliers also comes in handy. So you don't just use generic databases, and um, how the raw materials you're using are actually impacting. So they should know. And if they don't know, they better get at it, because it's going to be important for them as well. Um, you need team. I mentioned jokingly the data guy, but you need someone who understands the technical side in depth, and hopefully either the same person or other people in the team have a good business acumen. They know how your business works, your processes, and your flows. So you want that as well, and data literacy as well, especially in terms of how LCAs are performed. So yeah, I think that's top of mind for capabilities would be that's to just get started with some level of confidence. And
Mhm.
in terms of leadership, I guess the ultimate goal would be to be making decisions based on environmental impact, and
Yeah.
this takes patience and nuance. It takes time. I mentioned 18 to 24 months, but again, that varies depending on your particular configuration. But you're essentially going to get um, more how can I say this? LCA is not going to solve all the critical questions. So you want the involvement of leadership. And we also touched on strategy. So how that feeds a bigger, longer reaching perspective of your business looking into the future. So I guess the idea would, uh, the recommendation I would make is just to start small, to try one product and ask one question you want to answer with the LCA, to start building some internal muscle in your organization between expanding to other arenas. And in general, yeah, work with one LCA, see what you learn, and then, yeah, go, go further.
Excellent, excellent. My
Yeah.
final one. You describe LCA as a driver of cultural transformation, which I very much like. What changes in mindset or behavior do you typically observe in the organizations that you have been working for?
Um, I think success, or really extracting the value you can get from this um, whole thing with LCA would depend on your ability to tolerate discomfort, if I can put it that way.
Mhm.
Multiple paradigms are going to emerge, and this is kind of summarizing things was already mentioned in our conversation. But the systemic thinking and the unavoidability of trade-offs. So or said in other words, the impossibility of optimizing in all fronts. all the time. So having to pick, having to find balances and trade-offs between phenomena is something that is uncomfortable, but that we need to embrace and somehow overcome the more basic traditional narratives where I am best, I lead in all aspects, we always win, that kind of thinking. So definitely that is part of the cultural transformation that is required. It's more holistic, more connected, and if I can say so, more humble as well, in the sense that it's not about winning everyone in all fronts at all costs, but rather performing well. Another thing that comes to
Improving,
mind.
right?
I'm sorry. Yeah, you were
And
saying.
improving.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Indeed. Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
it's the learning mindset, like we already had this before. So being on the way, improving along the way, but of course also making mistakes along the way.
Absolutely. Yeah, 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 for sure. Yeah, yeah. It's just learning by doing, as we said.
Yeah.
Not assuming you should know everything. So just knowing where you want, in which direction you want to go. I'm constantly going back to the map analogy, but it's for some
Yeah.
reason it's very powerful for me as
Yeah.
you're exploring
True.
unknown terrain. So you can't expect to be knowing the terrain you're exploring because it's the first time around. So you want to, you can probably say that's a mountain, that's a river. I want to go in that direction, that other direction, but you don't know every step you take. You know for sure where your feet are going to land. So yeah, there's some level of
Yeah.
humbleness there is also advisable. And the other one would be probably the cross-functional aspect of this, the collaboration between the departments. That, of course, the breaking the silos thing is something that is not coming out of LCA. That's a thing. We know that's the way to go for more resilient and more collaborative organizations. LCA only contributes to that or demands that more and more. So
Mhm.
definitely, I would say again the that idea of discomfort, but that is short term is it bothers, but it's necessary to build a um, um, more resilient organization, future facing, and that is able to overcome impacts that will come. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Excellent insights, Miguel. I will just sum up a little bit for the audience. So you mentioned a couple of times the valuable map of impact that LCAs create. Of course, the framework of compliance helps here. LCAs, you said, are not necessarily comparable, so that might be a mistake that some people might have in mind. Double materiality assessment you also mentioned, which is highly relevant and helpful also alongside the way for different views. Internalization of LCA helps for the learning of the organization, but it can take around 18 to 24 months to give an idea. The CO2 focus, as we had it, might blur the view on other ecological important impacts. So that's surely something that can help in taking the right decisions. Economic value often comes from cost savings, is what you said, even early on in the process. It leads to more informed decisions. LCAs can reveal blind spots in the product development process, and they were built for physical products and might fail in other areas. Good information systems are necessary, but they do not need to be perfect. Should, but of course, be able to evolve. And finally, you should be able to tolerate discomfort, have a good portion of system thinking, and LCAs help breaking silo thinking. So that's a really good, let's say, overview on LCAs with some deep dives into specific aspects. So thanks a lot for that. Really helpful. Really appreciate it, Miguel. I wish you all the best for your the next endeavors that you're working on. And yeah, thanks again for being with me today.
thank you again for having me. Bye bye.
Absolutely. Take care. Bye bye, Miguel.